Hello there. Welcome back to the quiet space where curiosity doesn't rush, it simply drifts. Tonight we're stepping into a question that has teased philosophers, puzzled neuroscientists, and kept poets awake at night. What happens to time when you dream? You know the feeling. You close your eyes for what feels like a heartbeat, and suddenly it's morning. Or maybe you dream an entire lifetime. Conversations, journeys, whole landscapes. Only to find that 5 minutes have passed. Dream time is slippery. It refuses to follow the neat tick-tock rhythm of your bedside clock. And maybe that's the first thing to understand. When you sleep, your brain quietly rebels against the idea that time is rigid at all. Let's start gently, at the threshold. Imagine lying in bed, your body heavy, your breath slow. The room hasn't changed, but your awareness begins to slide. This drifting state, called hypnagogia, is like standing on a pier, watching the tide creep in. Thoughts soften into images. Time loosens its grip. A minute can stretch like taffy or vanish like mist. The brain waves you produce here shift from the quick buzz of wakefulness into slower rolling rhythms, the neurological version of dimming the lights. Already the clock in your skull is keeping a different beat. As you sink into deeper sleep, your body locks itself into cycles. About every 90 minutes, you rotate through stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and then the sparkling theatre of REM, rapid eye movement, where most vivid dreams appear. But here's the twist. These cycles are not experienced evenly. The first half of the night leans toward deep, slow-wave sleep. Later, as dawn inches closer, REM stretches its legs. A single REM phase near morning might last 40 minutes or more. In other words, your perception of dream time is already built into biology. The night is sculpted like a symphony, with quiet movements first and dramatic crescendos later. But the strange part is not just when dreams happen, it's how time behaves inside them. In waking life, your brain keeps time using synchronized firing of neurons like tiny drummers marching in step. This rhythm allows you to estimate seconds, minutes, hours. In dreams, those drummers start improvising. The synchronization loosens. Events are stitched together, not by the clock, but by meaning. That's why you can walk into a room and suddenly know you've lived there for years, or speak to someone and instantly sense a lifelong history. Dream time is narrative time, not mechanical time. Some experiments show this isn't just imagination. When volunteers are trained to signal from inside lucid dreams, by moving their eyes in a specific pattern, researchers can measure how long dream actions actually take. The surprising result? Many tasks, like counting or walking, take about as long in dreams as in waking life. Yet the surrounding story of the dream can compress or expand beyond recognition. It's as if the brain is playing two films at once, one in real time, another heavily edited. Think of it like reading a novel. One sentence might cover 10 years, and so he grew old. In just a moment, decades pass. Dreams edit life in the same way. Time jumps are accepted without question because your sleeping brain doesn't demand consistency. It's not a courtroom, it's a theatre. Continuity is optional. And yet, subjectively, dreams feel whole. We rarely stop in the middle of a dream and complain, "Excuse me, how did we get from the forest to the airport?" We just flow. That effortless acceptance is part of why dreams can warp time so freely. The inner critic, the one that checks logic and continuity when we're awake, is drowsy, off-duty. Imagination takes the wheel and with it the clock dissolves. But here's something beautiful. The very brain regions that distort time in dreams are also the ones that give waking life its richness, memory, imagination, emotion. All of these bend time even when we're conscious. A joyful hour with someone you love vanishes in a blink. A dull minute in a waiting room crawls like an eternity. In a way, dreams just make visible what has always been true. Time is not a fixed ruler we measure life with. It is elastic, woven from attention and feeling. So, as you let yourself drift tonight, remember this: sleep is not an escape from time. It is a lesson in how flexible time really is. Every dream, whether it lasts 5 seconds or feels like 50 years, is proof that the clock inside your head is as much storyteller as it is scientist. And in the stillness between dreams, when there is only breath and darkness, time might not exist at all. When the body rests in sleep, time itself seems to loosen its laces. In the waking world, seconds march forward in steady precision, each tick identical to the last. But in the dreaming mind, those ticks are not equal. Some moments stretch, others collapse, and sometimes entire hours seem to appear or vanish as if conjured out of thin air. The brain is partly to blame, of course. While awake, it keeps time by patterns of electrical pulses, rhythmic waves of neurons firing together like drummers in a parade. These rhythms help us track sequences, remember the order of events, and anchor experiences in chronology. Yet when dreaming, those drummers stop marching in straight lines. They improvise. Some race ahead, others slow down, and the steady beat of time becomes a jazz piece with no conductor. This is why a dream can begin with you stepping into a hallway and end with you having lived through an entire year. It is not because your brain invented 12 months in a few minutes, but because it abandoned the need for continuity. The dream accepts jumps, edits, and dissolves in the same way a film editor accepts a cut between scenes. You don't demand an explanation for how a character moved from one city to another in a single frame. You simply watch. Scientists have tried to catch time in the act of bending. In one study, people trained to become aware inside their dreams, lucid dreamers, were asked to count slowly while they slept. By signaling with their eyes, which can still move freely during REM sleep, they told researchers when they began and when they finished. Remarkably, the time it took to count in dreams nearly matched the time it took when awake. But here's the puzzle. In the same dream, a sweeping story might unfold that feels like hours, even though the eye signals show only minutes had passed. So dream time is layered. On one level, the brain keeps a kind of real-time motor clock, where actions like counting or walking stay true to waking speed. On another level, the narrative clock tells its own tale, unconcerned with physics or seconds. This is the clock that lets you fall in love in the span of a glance, or live a childhood in the space of a single dream scene. It's not broken, it's simply serving a different purpose. And what purpose might that be? Dreams are not meant to keep records. They are rehearsals, collages, laboratories of emotion. For practice and imagination, strict timekeeping is unnecessary. What matters is intensity, the weight of a moment, not its duration. That is why a short dream can feel unforgettable while a long night can disappear without a trace. Consider the way memory behaves in dreams. In waking life, we stitch events into a timeline. Breakfast precedes work, work precedes evening, evening precedes sleep. But in dreams, the librarian of memory, the hippocampus, is more playful. It takes fragments from childhood, blends them with yesterday's conversations, and presents them side by side. The brain does not ask whether they belong together in time. It asks only whether they belong together in meaning. The result is a world where sequence dissolves and experience expands. This explains why many dreams vanish upon waking. Without the structure of time, memories struggle to survive. They arrive as fragments, the color of a wall, a single sentence, the sensation of flying. The rest collapses. Time is the glue that binds memories into stories, and when dream time ignores the glue, the story falls apart. And yet some dreams linger with astonishing vividness. Epic dreams, psychologists call them. They sprawl across imagined days or years, leaving you with the strange ache of having lived another life. People often wake from these dreams with grief, nostalgia, even longing, as though they had lost a world that only existed for a handful of minutes. What is remarkable is how familiar this strangeness really is. Even in waking life, time is never equal. A joyful afternoon disappears in a blink, while a dull moment stretches into eternity. Dreams simply magnify what we already know. Time is elastic, stitched together by attention, emotion, and memory rather than by clocks. So the next time you wake from a dream that seemed to last forever, remember, your brain was not lying to you. It was showing you another way of living time, one that measures life not in seconds but in stories. Time in dreams has no loyalty. It bends for you, folds around you, laughs when you try to hold it steady. You close your eyes for 10 minutes in the real world, and suddenly you've lived through an entire season inside your head. A year of traveling, a lifetime of conversations, whole friendships built from scratch, only to vanish with the sound of your alarm clock. How does a brain invent that much time from so little? Think of memory as film reels scattered on the floor. Your dreaming mind isn't playing them in order, it's grabbing pieces, splicing them together, running them at double speed. A single second can stretch into a whole dinner party because your brain simply refuses to tell you the truth about duration. It plays tricks like a magician who can pull hours out of a hat. You might notice how, in dreams, beginnings and endings dissolve. You're suddenly at the wedding, already in the middle of the vows. You're already late for the train, already boarding, already leaving. Time collapses into already. It doesn't flow, it leaps. No one asks for continuity, and no one complains when it's missing. And isn't that fascinating? In waking life, we obsess over clocks, calendars, deadlines. But in dreams, you don't even notice the absence of timekeeping. You never think, where's my watch? You don't need it. You're too busy living the scriptless now. Dream time feels infinite because it ignores the ruler. A second in REM sleep is stuffed with so much imagery, it feels like hours. The brain layers meaning, compresses details, paints faster than your awareness can keep up. Imagine trying to write a novel during a single breath. That's what the mind does each night. And there's something else. Dreams are stingy with transitions. They don't waste energy on moving you from one room to another, or from one day to the next. You don't drive from city to city. You blink, and you're already there. Your brain saves time by skipping the boring bits, which makes sense. Why sit through traffic when the story can jump cut? It's like a movie that edits out every tedious second, leaving only the charged, the surreal, the emotionally loaded. So maybe that's why dream hours feel richer. They're not bloated with filler. No waiting rooms, no red lights, no small talk about the weather. Only the distilled essence of your mind's theatre. Pure story, pure feeling. That's why 5 minutes can feel like a century. It's not about how long, it's about how dense. But then comes the strange return. You wake up and everything collapses. The years you just lived shrink into a blur, a fog that melts as you reach for it. Sometimes you wake up grieving people who never existed, aching for places that were never real. All of that time, gone like steam. It makes you wonder, is dream time less real or just less permanent? You felt it. You experienced it. You can still taste its residue in your chest when you wake. If a moment is lived, does it matter that it didn't line up with the clock on the wall? Maybe time in dreams reveals what time really is. Not numbers ticking forward, but a measure of experience. In waking life, we compress time too. We say, that week flew by, or that day lasted forever. It's the same bending, only gentler, less extreme. Dreams just turn the dial all the way up. And if that's the case, then you could say time is never truly objective. It's elastic, personal, stitched from how much your mind can hold at once. A single dream moment is vast, because you're filling it with an impossible density of thought and sensation. Waking time feels slower, because reality has to obey physics. But in dreams, you're free. It's a reminder that time isn't one thing, it's many. There's clock time, the rigid one, the one that runs governments and schools, and then there's lived time, the messy, uneven one where seconds expand and shrink depending on your heartbeat, your attention, your emotions. Dreams strip away the illusion of control. They show you time as clay, soft, moldable, untrustworthy. And maybe that's why waking feels so heavy. You come back into the hard version where seconds march in single file and refuse to listen. But still, you carry the echo. Somewhere deep down, your brain remembers the other kind of time. The infinite, the collapsing, the skipping. And sometimes when you're awake, you feel it tugging at the edges of your day. Time inside a dream does not behave like the polite, linear creature you think you know. It does not walk in a straight line, 1 second after the next, obedient to clocks. Instead, it folds, it stutters, it stretches like chewing gum until it thins into near transparency, then snaps back like a rubber band. A dream can last a lifetime in what the outside world would measure as only minutes. But that's the trick. The world outside doesn't apply here. Inside, your brain is free to bend the rules like an author ripping pages out of a book and rearranging them at will. In this space, time is not so much measured as it is experienced. Your brain stitches together sensations, fragments, emotions, and symbols into something that feels like continuity. That's why you can wake from a dream and insist it lasted hours, though the clock insists it barely took a breath. Both are true depending on which world you give authority to, the external with its ticking hands or the internal with its woven illusions. It's unsettling, isn't it, that something as seemingly solid as time can feel so fragile when you're asleep, that the same mind which helps you catch the bus at exactly 8:07 a.m. is also capable of trapping you in a looping hallway for what feels like weeks, or letting you live a whole romance with someone who doesn't exist. Your brain doesn't care about seconds when you're dreaming, it cares about meaning. Think of it like this. When you're awake, time is money. Strict, accounted for, exchanged. When you're dreaming, time is paint. It's smeared across the canvas however your mind chooses. Sometimes in neat lines, sometimes in wild, chaotic splashes. There is no shortage, only expression. That's why dreams are often remembered not as precise events, but as atmospheres, moods, strange gravities that linger longer than any details. And yet the strange part is how convincing it all feels. How deeply real those distorted timelines are when you're inside them. You never pause mid-dream and think, wait, why has this dinner lasted 12 days? You simply flow with it, as if this is the natural way time behaves. Which raises a terrifying question. How do you know the time you're living right now isn't just another construct? Another version of painted minutes arranged so smoothly that you've never thought to question it. When you dream, you might find yourself watching days pass by in a single glance. You might age, you might even die and still continue onward as if the rules of time are suggestions rather than laws. Your brain doesn't panic at this. It accepts, it carries on, and when you wake, you carry traces of this acceptance back with you in the strange comfort that maybe the rigid ticking of the clock isn't as final as it seems. But there's another layer to this puzzle. Science tells us that REM sleep, the stage where most vivid dreams occur, tends to run in cycles of about 90 minutes. Within those cycles, bursts of dream activity can last for just a few minutes, then expand to nearly an hour. This biological rhythm seems orderly, predictable, yet what you experience inside those minutes has no obligation to match. You can live an entire decade within the span of one REM cycle. The machinery of the brain and the perception of the mind do not speak the same language. One ticks, the other drifts. It's as if you are two beings, the sleeper lying in bed and the wanderer roaming through elastic time. Both are you, both are true, but they are not synced. And when you wake, the wanderer collapses back into the sleeper, and the time that stretched and folded disappears into a few scattered images that slip through your fingers. What makes dreams so haunting is not just the imagery, but this very manipulation of time. They remind us that what we think of as reality is already fragile. If your mind can make 10 minutes feel like 10 years while you sleep, how much of your waking sense of time is also an illusion? How many days, weeks, years might have already been bent and stretched without you noticing simply because your perception accepted it as normal? Perhaps time itself is not a ruler laid out before you, but a fabric you are constantly weaving, whether asleep or awake. And maybe the only real difference between dreaming and living is how tightly you grip the threads. Time is not polite when you're asleep. It doesn't wait for you. It doesn't ask how fast or slow you'd like things to unfold. It bends itself into knots, folds into loops, and serves you realities that don't respect the clock hanging on your wall. You've noticed it. Everyone has. You lie down at night, close your eyes, drift into dream, and suddenly you're inside a sprawling narrative that feels like it lasted days. You were in a city you've never seen before, walking streets with impossible architecture, talking to people who don't exist. You had conversations, conflicts, resolutions, maybe even entire lifetimes compressed into a single REM cycle. Then you wake up, look at your phone, and it's been, 13 minutes. This is the strange truth. Your brain doesn't measure dream time with seconds and minutes. It measures with experience. The richness of a moment, not the length of it, is what dictates how long it feels. In waking life, 1 minute of waiting at a red light feels endless, while 1 minute of laughing with someone you love vanishes instantly. Dreams take that trick and multiply it. They strip out the external anchors, no clocks, no sunrises, no schedules, leaving you in pure subjective time. And pure subjective time is elastic. There are stories of people who dream entire childhoods growing up inside dream worlds, only to wake and find they'd been asleep for a nap. There are people who swear they've lived decades inside a dream, only to open their eyes and realize morning hasn't even arrived yet. Are these exaggerations? Maybe. But the brain doesn't exaggerate the feeling. And feeling is all time ever was to us. Your brain has only one job while you sleep: to keep you alive, to keep the body regulated, and to occasionally throw you a movie from its inner theatre. Dreams are not bound by oxygen intake or heartbeat rhythm. They are bound only by how quickly neurons fire and weave patterns together. And neurons can spin 1,000 images in the span of a second. They can compress a journey across mountains into a flicker of electrical pulses. To the dreamer, it's real. To the clock, it's laughably short. Think about this. The average REM cycle lasts maybe 10 to 40 minutes. Within it, you can dream a scene where you spend a week hiking through forests, getting lost, meeting strangers, climbing cliffs, and eventually finding home again. You wake disoriented because your body only gave you a fraction of an hour, but your mind tricked you into believing you'd been gone much longer. It works the other way too. Sometimes a dream stretches like taffy. You're stuck in a single looping event, trying to run but unable, trying to speak but sound won't come out, staring at a clock that won't move. Those dreams feel eternal. You wake up exhausted, like you've been trapped in limbo. And yet the data shows, maybe 5 minutes past, your body barely had time to turn over in bed. So what does this tell us? That time inside the brain is not time outside the brain. The two run parallel, but are not the same track. One is physical, tied to the rotation of Earth and the ticking of quartz. The other is mental, tied to the density of thought, the layering of images, the intensity of emotions. You might even say, when you dream, you step outside of physical time and enter a pocket dimension made of perception. In there, a minute is not a minute. It is a canvas. The more the mind paints onto it, the larger it feels. The less it paints, the smaller it shrinks. And this is where the mystery deepens. If time in dreams is elastic, then what about your sense of self? Because your sense of self is always tied to memory. If you dream you spent years in a place, then woke, your body denies it happened, but your brain has already logged the memory of it. So now you hold years that never were, condensed into a single night. Who's to say those years don't exist in their own way? Who's to say you didn't actually live them inside that elastic zone? We treat time like a rigid structure, but dreams laugh at structure. They remind you that time is not an absolute. It is a fragile agreement between your brain and the outside world. Break that agreement and you see the truth. Time is stretchable, breakable, rearranged by the weight of experience. When you wake from one of those marathon dreams, feeling like you've carried lifetimes in your skull, the disorientation lingers. You rub your face, blink at the room, wonder what's real, and maybe, quietly, you suspect your waking life is not that different. Maybe the minutes and hours you call real are just another dream, more consistent but still shaped by perception. Dreams expose the lie. Time was never about clocks. It was always about the depth of what you felt inside it. In the dream, clocks don't behave. They melt, they fracture, they restart mid-tick. Try staring at a clock in a dream and you'll notice it never quite sits still. The hands bend like liquid, or the numbers change every time you glance back. Your mind can't stabilize them because your mind doesn't actually need clocks here. Dreams operate on an internal rhythm, not mechanical time, and yet you still feel time moving. Dreams can feel eternal or like they lasted seconds. You wake up and check the clock, only 8 minutes passed, but in those 8 minutes you lived through years, maybe a whole lifetime compressed into a single REM cycle. It's not illusion, it's compression. Your brain runs its own editing software, chopping and stitching together a sense of continuity that never actually unfolded. This is why you might dream of walking across a desert for days, only to discover you were asleep for a 20-minute nap. The desert wasn't there. The sand wasn't infinite, but your brain took the feeling of endlessness and layered it across memory. When you woke up, you carried that memory like luggage, but it was luggage packed with nothing, an illusion of duration. Scientists sometimes try to measure dream time. They've asked lucid dreamers, people who can become aware inside their dreams, to count seconds or perform tasks while sleeping. Oddly, their internal timekeeping is close to waking time. Not exact, but close. Meaning, if you count to 60 in a dream, it usually takes around 60 seconds in real life. So some parts of the brain keep the clock running. Other parts just smash the clock into pieces and throw it around. That's the paradox of dream time. It is both consistent and wildly distorted. A minute can last a minute, or it can stretch into infinity. Your brain decides which one fits the story. Think about this. Every night, your body cycles through REM stages, and those REM stages expand as sleep continues. Early in the night, a REM phase might last 10 minutes. Later, close to dawn, it might stretch to an hour. Meaning most of your vivid dreams happen in the morning, when time inside is most elastic. When you're closer to waking, your brain is closer to story mode, narrative stitching, making longer dreams feel coherent. But coherence isn't the same as reality. Dreams cut, skip, and jump like bad film reels. You might dream of leaving your house, opening the door, and suddenly you're in a classroom you haven't seen since childhood. Your mind doesn't care that this defies physics. It just wants the story to continue. The jump is disguised with a feeling of course. Time bends the same way. 1,000 events unfold and you accept them because your brain whispers, of course. Here's the strange part. Your sense of self in the dream is the glue that holds this warped time together. If you feel like you are still you, you'll measure events as happening sequentially. Even if they're nonsensical, even if you grew wings, fought a shadow, and fell into an ocean in the span of 5 seconds, you experienced them in a line, so your brain says, this took time, and yet, outside your skull, nothing actually happened. No seconds passed except the ones ticking on your bedroom clock. That dissonance is wild. A whole existence lived, but only a moment lost. Sometimes people dream of entire alternate lives. They wake up disoriented, unsure of which world is the real one. Some describe lovers, jobs, families they had in the dream, memories so vivid they linger for years, and still, all of it unraveled in a single hour of sleep. Imagine carrying a memory of a decade-long marriage that never existed. Your body aged 0 seconds, your mind aged 10 years. Dream time exposes how fragile your sense of chronology is. Memory can be stacked, reshuffled, accelerated. Your brain doesn't need a steady clock to tell you who you are. It only needs enough illusion of order. So when you close your eyes, you hand over the keys. You let your body sink into paralysis, your senses shut off, and your mind begins its theatre. In there, time is clay. It can be stretched thin, pulled wide, snapped apart, folded into itself. You wake up and think, it was just a dream. But for a while you lived in a timeline nobody else shared. Time outside your skin continued evenly. Time inside was a labyrinth. And every night you fall willingly back into that labyrinth, where hours can collapse into moments and moments can expand into forever. There is something strange about the way dreams handle distance. You can walk for hours, climb mountains, even cross oceans, and yet when you wake up, not a single second has passed on the clock beside your bed. Dreams shrink the geography of experience into folds, as though the entire map of a lifetime can be packed into a single heartbeat. This is not time as you know it. It is time wrapped around itself, a Mobius strip of memory and sensation. You could stand on a dream street forever, watching shadows move across buildings that don't exist. You could spend a lifetime arguing with a faceless stranger who speaks in riddles. And when your alarm jolts you awake, you might discover that the entire saga lasted no more than 3 minutes of real sleep. That dissonance is the riddle of dream time. Duration is not measured by clocks, but by how much experience the mind can pour into a fragile instant. Your brain, when dreaming, abandons the rigid pacing of seconds. It does not care for the tyranny of the minute hand. Instead, it compresses entire epics into fleeting blips of neural electricity. Think of it like music. Awake time is a steady metronome, tick-tock, tick-tock, while dream time is jazz, stretching, bending, improvising, swallowing beats whole and spitting them back out twisted. You can't dance to it, but you feel it. What's fascinating is that researchers have tested this. In lucid dreams, where the dreamer knows they are dreaming, people have been asked to perform a simple action, like counting to 10, and often the counting inside the dream matches roughly with real-world seconds. But the content of the dream, the landscapes and stories unfolding, can still feel endless. It's as though the body keeps one clock while the mind invents another. Two timelines, overlapping but never aligning. Maybe this is why dreams carry such a strange weight. A 5-minute nightmare can leave you shaken for an entire day, as if you'd survived an ordeal that lasted months. A tender dream of reunion can feel like hours of conversation, even though your body has barely shifted in bed. Dreams measure time in intensity, not in units. They measure it in fear, in joy, in longing. That is why one dream clings to you for years while another evaporates the instant your eyes open. And isn't that how life feels sometimes too? Not every hour carries the same weight. Waiting in a hospital hallway stretches endlessly, while an afternoon spent laughing with a friend vanishes in a blink. The clock says both were equal, but your mind insists otherwise. In that sense, dreams are not so alien. They are simply exaggerations of what you already know. Time is elastic. Time is felt, not counted. There's another trick the dream plays with distance and duration. You rarely ever travel in the dream. One moment you're in your childhood home, the next you're on a train to nowhere, then suddenly inside a collapsing building. There is no journey between the places, only sudden appearances, as though the map itself has folded and brought 2 points together. It is teleportation of the mind, and it collapses the need for chronological order. Time bends because space bends with it. This collapsing is why dreams often feel like they're showing you everything at once. Past, present, and future crowd into the same room. You're both a child and an adult. You're both speaking and hearing echoes. You're both searching and being found. Awake life separates these things into neat compartments. Dreaming life throws them all into the air and lets them fall wherever they may. The result feels messy but also profound. You glimpse how entangled your own timeline really is. Consider this. Maybe the dream is not trying to confuse you. Maybe it's giving you a preview of how time might look without the artificial grid we impose on it. A hint that the divisions we cling to, before and after, yesterday and tomorrow, are conveniences, not absolutes. The dream whispers, here, everything touches everything. The past leaks forward, the future bleeds back. And then, when you wake up, you return to the box. The clock resumes its march, and you agree to live by its rules again. But the residue of the dream lingers, doesn't it? A stubborn reminder that the clock might not be telling the full story. You carry that reminder like a pebble in your shoe, uncomfortable but impossible to throw away. Perhaps this is why people seek meaning in dreams. Not because the content is prophetic, but because the structure of the dream reminds us that reality could be more flexible than we think. Dreams ask us to question, what if time isn't a single line, but a tapestry? What if the future is already brushing against us in ways we can't quite see? And in that question lies the beauty. Dreams do not give you answers. They simply fracture the clock, hand you the broken pieces and say, look, there is more than one way to measure a moment. Time in dreams has no manners. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't follow your schedule. It doesn't even care about the word linear. Instead, it stretches, folds, splinters, and compresses itself into something that feels almost like time, but isn't. You've probably had the experience. You close your eyes for what feels like a few minutes, and when you wake up, hours have passed. Or the opposite. You swear you just slept through an entire lifetime, only to see that the clock has advanced by a pathetic 30 minutes. In dreams, time obeys no external law. It's a shapeshifter, an improviser, a trickster god with no loyalty to physics. But why does it feel this way? Your brain, when dreaming, doesn't rely on the outside world to measure time. Normally, when awake, your sense of duration comes from constant checks against reality, the sun rising, your body moving, the ticking of a clock, the rhythm of conversation. But when you dream, that scaffolding collapses. Instead of external markers, your brain manufactures its own timeline, one stitched out of impressions, sensations, and half-formed narratives. The length of the dream depends not on minutes, but on density, how many images, feelings, and scenes your brain stacks together. That's why a 5-second dream can feel like a 5-hour journey. Think about a movie montage. A whole summer of falling in love can be condensed into a 2-minute sequence, set to music with just flashes of moments. Your brain does the same in dreams, except it doesn't always edit for clarity. Sometimes it just piles scenes on top of scenes until you're convinced you've lived an entire alternate life. But there's another side of this. Dream time can also collapse into nothing. Some dreams are pure blink events. You fall asleep, and in what feels like one instant you're in the middle of a conversation or standing in a place you've never been. The dream skips the setup, skips the journey, skips the in-between. It delivers only fragments, disconnected from any sense of duration. This tells us something strange. Dreams don't care about continuity. The way you dream is more like the way memory works. Think about how you recall your day. You don't replay every second in real time. You compress, you highlight, you skip. Dreams operate on the same principle, except in real time as you sleep. It's memory making before the memory even exists. And sometimes this fractured perception of time gives birth to something unsettling, the dream that feels like it lasts forever. People who experience these often wake up shaken. They report having lived entire lifetimes, decades even, inside a single dream. They remember growing older, making choices, losing people, falling in love, having children. Then they wake up back in their real bed with their real body, and all those experiences vanish like smoke. The sense of loss can be haunting. For a few moments, you're not sure which life is the dream and which is reality. What's happening here? One theory is that dreams borrow the same neural machinery used for imagination and simulation. When you daydream, you can easily imagine weeks or years passing in just a few seconds of thought. Your brain doesn't actually simulate every tick of the clock. It fast-forwards, skips filler, and lands on the highlights. In dreams, this machinery is unshackled, turned up to maximum power. You can live a whole arc, a whole storyline in the span of a short REM cycle. And sometimes, these dream lifetimes feel so real that they leave behind emotional residue. You wake up mourning relationships that never happened, missing places that don't exist, carrying lessons from experiences you never had. Time in dreams may be fake, but the feelings are not. This is where it gets tricky. If our sense of time is so malleable, so easy to distort, then how much of our waking sense of time is just another illusion? We like to think of clocks as anchors, but clocks are external. The real anchor is your brain's perception. Without it, hours are meaningless. And if perception is flexible enough to give you an entire life in 30 minutes of REM, then maybe even waking time is less solid than we believe. What's the difference really between living 20 years in a dream and living 20 years awake? From your brain's perspective, both are constructed experiences, filtered through neurons, coloured by emotion. The only thing distinguishing them is continuity, the fact that the waking world doesn't vanish when you open your eyes. But maybe that's not as secure as we think. If dream time can expand and collapse without limit, then maybe time itself isn't a line at all. Maybe it's a landscape, and dreaming is just one way of wandering through it. So the next time you wake from a dream that felt eternal, don't dismiss it as just a dream. In some corner of your mind, in some neural pattern that briefly existed, you did live that life. Time in dreams isn't just elastic, it's disobedient. It refuses to play by the rules it follows in the waking world. Here, an hour can dissolve into a single instant, and a single instant can stretch itself until it feels like an eternity. Think of the last time you woke up from a dream that felt impossibly long. You might have travelled across continents, wandered through entire cities, met people you haven't seen in years, argued, laughed, wept, All of that could have unfolded in a handful of seconds while your body remained still, your eyes darting beneath their closed lids. So what's happening? Why does time in dreams feel so unruly? The first clue: your brain doesn't keep time the way clocks do. A clock is indifferent. It ticks whether you're bored, thrilled, or asleep. But your brain? It measures time through experience, through the density of memory. The more that happens, the more moments get created, the longer time feels. That's why a single afternoon spent traveling to a new place can feel so much longer than a month of working the same desk job. Novelty stretches perception, repetition collapses it. Dreams are flooded with novelty. Each image, no matter how strange, feels both new and urgent. Purple skies, staircases spiraling in impossible directions, conversations that bend logic. Every moment is unusual, every detail leaves a trace. Your brain records each as if it's important because in that state it cannot tell what matters and what doesn't. And so, in dreams, minutes feel bloated. They swell into hours. It's not time that's expanding, it's memory. But the reverse can also happen. Entire hours of sleep can pass without you recalling a single fragment of dream. This is time collapsing. You wake up and it's as if you just closed your eyes. Nothing is remembered, and so for you, nothing happened. Time isn't one thing, it's two things at once: the objective passing of seconds and the subjective unfolding of experience. And dreams sit exactly at that fault line. This is why philosophers sometimes say, we don't experience time directly, we experience change, and from that we infer time. But what if change is scrambled? What if the order of events is rearranged? What if the pace speeds up, then slows down? Dreams test these questions on us nightly. They scramble cause and effect. They fold beginnings into endings. They let you run from danger for what feels like miles, only to wake and realize you never moved at all. You wake up unsettled because the map you usually use, before, after, then, now, has been smudged. The lines blur. The compass spins. There's another layer to this. When you're awake, you live inside a constant narration. Your brain is always labeling, organizing, archiving events as they occur. That labeling process takes time, but in dreams, the narration weakens. The editor leaves the room. Instead of neatly ordered sequences, you're given raw images, collages of memory, bursts of emotion stitched together. This is why dreams often feel timeless. They're not wrong about time, they're simply free of the organizing voice that usually tells you how time should be. And then, of course, there's the body. The physical machinery of sleep alters perception. During REM sleep, the body is paralyzed. Your muscles won't respond. This means action becomes mental only. You run, but only in the theater of your mind. And the mental act of running doesn't take as long as the physical act would. You can cross oceans in seconds because you're not actually crossing them. You're skipping the real-world delays. But then, notice this. Sometimes dreams force you to wait, to climb stairs, to wander through endless hallways, to wait for something undefined. Why? Possibly because your mind is experimenting with the very sensation of delay. Even though it doesn't need to simulate slowness, sometimes it chooses to. Dreams are experiments in duration. They ask, what if this moment lasted forever? What if the end came too soon? What if there was no order at all? It's unsettling but also liberating, because if time inside dreams can expand, contract, or vanish altogether, what does that say about waking time? Maybe it suggests time isn't as rigid as we like to think. Maybe the hours we cling to are less solid than they appear. Maybe, like a dream, they can bend too. And maybe, just maybe, when you wake in the middle of the night with fragments of a dream still flickering behind your eyelids, you're catching a glimpse of how fragile time really is. Not a river, not a line, but a fabric that can be stretched, twisted, and torn. Dreams are not escape from time. They are reminders that time itself is slippery, that we never truly touch it, that what we live in, both awake and asleep, is not time, but the memory of change. And in that realization, the clock becomes less threatening. The seconds lose their sharpness. You realize even here, in the waking world, time is not what you thought. There's a peculiar truth about dreams. They can hold more hours than the night itself. A single nap, 10 minutes on the clock, can feel like weeks unraveling behind your eyes. Whole lifetimes are tucked inside that fragile gap between lying down and waking up. Time inside the dream doesn't bend, it folds. Like origami, where days compress into a crease and decades flatten into a fold. Your mind doesn't bother with the clock. It doesn't have to. It runs on memory, on rhythm, on whatever narrative feels most convincing in that moment. This is why you can dream of walking through a long, endless city, turning corner after corner, seeing thousands of faces you've never seen before, and yet, when you wake, the alarm says you've been asleep for 6 minutes. The brain cheats. It plays cinema with no sense of budget. It cuts out the parts where you're walking down the empty street and only shows you the moments where something happens. A sudden door, a sudden face, a sudden voice whispering your name. Every scene in a dream is edited like a highlight reel, which is why you never notice the missing transitions. You accept it even when you're in the middle of it. You never stop and say, wait, how did I get from my kitchen to this floating train station in the sky? You don't ask. Because the dream feels continuous, even when it isn't. Time in dreams is elastic because memory in dreams is elastic. Your brain can plant fake memories inside the dream while you're dreaming, so when you walk into a strange building, you might feel as though you've been working there for years, because the dream inserted the memories of an entire career in that instant, and you believed it. This is the strange sleight of hand of dreaming. The magician isn't some outside trickster. It's your own neurons convincing themselves that the impossible is logical. And when you wake up, the dream collapses like scaffolding. The skyscraper you thought was permanent disappears into thin air, and you're left with fragments, crumbling pieces. A half-remembered sentence. A hallway that had no end. Sometimes even less. Only a single image that feels like it meant everything, but you can't recall why. It's like waking from a movie and remembering only the color blue. Dream time is not chronological. It's thematic, emotional. You don't dream by the tick of a clock. You dream by the weight of feeling. A second of terror can stretch into an hour. A night of comfort can dissolve in an instant. It's why people who have nightmares often say they felt stuck for so long. Not because the dream had hours in it, but because fear dilates experience. Fear is a clock, but a broken one. It slows down when you want it to speed up. And on the other end, joy collapses time. When you dream of flying, of running without gravity pulling at your legs, of being with someone you've lost in the waking world, that kind of dream passes too quickly. You wake up grasping for it, like sand slipping between your fingers. Some scientists think dreams don't actually take up much time at all, that they're short bursts of activity compressed into the moment right before waking. But then how do you explain the lives people live inside them? How do you explain the dreams where you've aged 20 years, raised children who don't exist, or travelled across landscapes no one has mapped? Maybe the brain doesn't need hours to tell a story. Maybe it only needs a second and a spark. A thought, wrapped in electricity, expands into a whole saga the moment it crosses the stage of the mind. Time inside the dream isn't measured, it's imagined. And imagination doesn't respect minutes. It creates them. This is why a nap can feel infinite. Why a night's sleep can feel like a blink. Why time in dreams doesn't follow your watch but follows your wonder. And maybe this is the secret function of dreaming, to remind you that time is never as fixed as you think. That hours are not cages but interpretations. That the way you live a minute depends on how you feel it, not how the clock dictates it. Because if the dream can make 10 minutes feel like a lifetime, then perhaps, while awake, you can make a lifetime feel like more than just minutes. There is a strange truth about dreaming. You almost never die in your dreams. You might fall from skyscrapers, be chased by wolves, or drift out into the blackness of space. But the moment before impact, before teeth sink in, before suffocation takes you, something shifts. You wake up, or you shift scenes. The dream folds itself away like a magician hiding the trick. Why? because your mind can't stage a finale it's never rehearsed. Death is still too abstract, too unreachable, too unwritten, but if death is missing, then time itself becomes warped by that absence. A story without an ending is infinite. That's why dreams often feel circular, like you've been here before, like you're trapped in a loop. The chase never ends, the argument repeats, the stairs keep going. Without death, time doesn't close the loop. It spins it endlessly. Think of time in waking life as a line, birth on one side, death on the other. Everything you experience stretches between those two fixed poles, but in a dream, the poles are gone. The rope floats in midair, twisting, coiling back on itself, folding into knots. Time becomes recursive. It eats its own tail like an Ouroboros. That's why a single dream can feel like hours or days or sometimes like no time at all. There are people who swear they've lived entire lifetimes inside a single dream. They describe getting old, marrying, raising children, watching those children grow, and then, snap, they wake up in their 22-year-old body, confused, grieving the loss of a family that never existed. For them, dream time wasn't just distorted, it was expanded beyond measure. Their brains spun a whole universe in the span of a night. It's haunting, isn't it? To think your mind can trick you into believing you've lived decades, only to snatch it away in the morning. But isn't that also what life itself feels like? A long stretch, sometimes repetitive, sometimes shocking, until one morning it too snaps and you wake up somewhere else. Dreams teach us something brutal about time. It's not stable, it's elastic. Your brain is less concerned with keeping accurate clocks than with stitching a convincing story. A story with gaps filled in, jumps skipped, edits hidden. Think about how often in dreams you skip from one place to another, from one year to another, without noticing. You're a child in one moment, a grown adult the next, and it feels seamless. That's because the dream is running on narrative time, not clock time. Narrative time asks, does the story make sense? Is the flow convincing? If so, who cares if we skipped 10 years in between? That's why dreams are so good at tricking you. You never stop to question the missing pieces because your brain doesn't demand precision, it demands continuity. And continuity can bend, break, or even ignore physics entirely. You walk through a door and end up in another country. You blink and hours pass. You chase someone and realize you've been chasing them for eternity. The dream doesn't care, because the dream is less about telling time and more about maintaining immersion. But what does this mean when you wake up? It means your perception of time, even in waking life, is not absolute. It's filtered, it's interpreted. Your brain edits reality constantly, stretching or shrinking moments depending on your focus. That's why minutes of boredom feel like hours, while hours of joy feel like seconds. Dreams simply reveal the trick in its most extreme form. There's a reason philosophers and mystics have always compared waking life to a dream, because both depend on the mind's version of time, not on time itself. In dreams, you can step outside the straight line of life into a looping, folding, infinite version of existence. In waking life, you're just less aware of the editing process. But here's a thought that might keep you awake tonight. What if death itself is only the same trick? What if dying is just waking up from the dream of being alive, snapping into some higher awareness where the span of decades collapses into seconds or stretches into eternity? If that's true, then time isn't just strange in dreams, it's strange everywhere. The difference is, dreams let you peek behind the curtain. They let you feel, even for a second, what it's like when time loses its grip, when beginnings and endings blur, when existence is no longer a straight line but an ocean you can sink into, without edges, without clocks, without limits. And maybe that's why we dream at all, to remind us that the prison bars of time are thinner than we think, to remind us that the seconds we measure, the years we fear, the deadlines we chase, they're not as fixed as we imagine. They're stories we tell, illusions we believe, dreams we haven't yet woken from. There comes a point in every journey where words begin to collapse under their own weight. You can say infinity 1,000 times, but it still slips through your fingers like smoke. You can whisper forever until your voice cracks, but it never lands. And maybe that's the lesson. The biggest truths can't be spoken, only carried. The universe is not a story. It doesn't begin with once upon a time, and it doesn't end with happily ever after. It just is, expanding, shifting, cooling, darkening. It's not reaching for a conclusion. It's simply unfolding like a wave that has no shore. And here we are, these tiny sparks trying to stitch meaning into the silence, trying to write ourselves into a book that was never meant to have pages. But maybe that's what makes us beautiful. We know the silence will win and we speak anyway. We know time will erase us and we live anyway. We know stars burn out, galaxies die and atoms drift apart, but we still fall in love, still sing into the void, still light candles against the endless dark. The cosmos doesn't ask for meaning, but we give it one anyway. And in a strange way, maybe that is the meaning. Not a truth carved into the bones of the universe, but a truth we carve into ourselves. A truth that says, yes, I was here. Yes, I felt. Yes, I mattered. Even if no one is listening, even if no one remembers. The silence doesn't care, but we do. And maybe that's enough. Imagine the very last star. Trillions of years from now, when the galaxies have gone quiet and the cosmic stage is nothing but frozen black. Somewhere a single fading ember flickers, its light trembling against the endless night. It doesn't burn for applause, it doesn't burn for witnesses, it just burns because that's what it was born to do. That is its truth. And when it goes out, when even that final spark dissolves into cold ash, the universe won't cry, won't mourn. But for a brief and infinite moment, light existed, warmth existed. Something broke the silence. That's what you are. That's what we all are. Temporary flames in an indifferent sea. You're not supposed to last forever. You're supposed to burn. And when you burn, you illuminate things no silence could ever erase. Kindness, wonder, longing, laughter, grief. These small, fragile acts ripple out across the dark. You'll never know how far they travel. You'll never see the echoes they create. But they exist, and in that sense, maybe nothing is truly lost. We keep asking the wrong question, not, does the universe end, or what comes after the silence? The real question is, what do you do with your flicker before it fades? Do you hoard it, hide it, guard it in fear that the night will steal it away? Or do you lift it bare-handed into the darkness, knowing it will vanish, but knowing also that it matters while it's here? The silence is vast, yes, but so is the courage it takes to exist inside it, to be small and still choose to shine, to be temporary and still choose to love. One day, you will close your eyes for the last time. You will join the silence. You won't carry your possessions, your plans, your anxieties with you. All that will remain is the echo of how you burned while you were here. And the strange, miraculous part? That's enough. Because existence was never about escaping the silence. It was about defying it. Not forever, but for now. And so, as we drift back into the quiet, let this truth settle in your chest. You don't need to outlive the stars. You don't need to conquer infinity. You don't need to be remembered by eternity. You only need to burn brightly and briefly as yourself. Because in a universe that never needed you, you still arrived. And in a silence that will one day swallow everything, you still sang. And if that isn't enough to call meaning, then what else could ever be? So let it end. Let the silence take the last word, but let it take it knowing this. For one fleeting heartbeat of infinity, you were here.